The room was quiet, too quiet. A soft song floated through the air, a lullaby sung in a trembling voice. The mother sat on a wooden chair beside a cradle, her body leaning forward, her eyes fixed on the empty space. Her lips moved slowly, shaping words of love and sorrow. Her hands shook as she touched the edge of the cradle, as if the child inside was only sleeping. But the cradle was empty. The child she sang for was gone. Her people told her to stop, to accept the truth, to let go. They said her baby had been lost during the chaos, taken in the fire and smoke of war. But she could not stop. Her heart refused to believe it. Every night she returned to this room. Every night she sang the same soft song. Her voice cracked, yet she sang. She sang because hope was the only thing left to her. Her song was her rebellion against the silence, against the grief that tried to crush her. The shadows in the room seemed to listen. The air itself carried her song like a secret. It was not only a lullaby, it was a call, a prayer, a desperate wish for her child to hear her wherever she was. Sometimes she closed her eyes and imagined the child's small hands reaching out, the baby's breath soft against her skin. Sometimes she imagined the cradle filled with warmth again. But when she opened her eyes, it was always empty. The emptiness cut into her like a blade, sharp and cruel. Her people whispered about her behind closed doors. They said she had gone mad. They said she was clinging to lies. But none of them were mothers. None of them understood the pain of a child ripped away. Outside her home, the city was broken. Buildings stood in ruins. Smoke still rose in places where the fire had not died. The war had left scars on everything. The ground was cracked, the air heavy with the smell of ash, and in every corner there were stories of loss. Families broken, children gone, lives torn apart, and always there was the name of the enemy whispered in anger. Humans. Her people hated them, feared them, cursed them. The humans had brought fire and machines of war. They had taken everything. To her people, humans were monsters, but to her, one thought kept burning inside. If the humans were monsters, why had she not seen her baby's body? Why had her child simply disappeared? The mystery haunted her. Her grief was heavy, but her hope was heavier still. That night, like so many nights before, she sat beside the cradle. Her voice was softer than ever, almost a whisper. She sang of stars, of light, of safe return. She sang of love that could not be broken. Not by war, not by death, not by the cruelty of enemies. Her hands gripped the cradle tightly, as if her touch could somehow bring her child back. And then, for just a moment, she thought she heard something. A faint sound like breathing. She stopped singing and held her breath. Her heart raced, her eyes widened. The room was still again, only silence remained. But her body trembled with the strange feeling that someone, somewhere had heard her song. She pressed her forehead against the cradle, whispering words only a mother could speak. "Come back to me, my child," she said. "Find your way back to me." Her tears wet the wood of the cradle. Her voice cracked again, but she did not stop. The empty cradle had become more than wood and cloth. It was a symbol, a promise. As long as she sang, she would not give up. As long as her voice filled the air, her child was not truly lost. The night stretched on. Shadows moved across the walls. Her song rose and fell, soft and broken, and outside in the ruined city, the wind carried her voice farther than she knew, past the broken streets, past the collapsed walls, past the scars of war. The song carried into the night like a signal. Someone would hear it. Something was coming. Though she could not see it yet, she closed her eyes once more, rocking the empty cradle gently. To her, it was not empty, not truly. To her, the cradle still held life, still held hope. Her heart refused to accept silence. Her heart refused to let go, and far away, where shadows met the ruins, footsteps began to move, slow, steady, coming closer. But she did not hear them. Not yet. She only sang, clinging to her dream. The cradle was empty, but her hope was alive. And hope can be more dangerous, more powerful, than any weapon of war. The city lay in silence, broken only by the sound of the wind. Streets that were once full of laughter and trade now stood empty. Shattered walls rose like the bones of a dead giant. Every corner of the city carried the memory of fire, smoke, and war. The people moved through the ruins like shadows. They spoke in whispers, never in songs, never in joy. It was as if the war had stolen not only their homes, but also their voices. Every face was lined with grief. Every eye carried a story of loss. And in every house there was an empty chair. A missing father, a missing mother, a missing child. The mother walked among them sometimes, carrying her silence like a cloak. Her people pitied her, but they also judged her. She has gone mad, they said behind her back. She sings to nothing. She cannot let go. But none dared to say it to her face. There was something about her eyes that silenced them. Something fierce, something unbroken, even in the ruins. The war with humans had left scars deeper than any wound. Her people remembered the thunder of human machines, the fire that rained from the sky. They remembered the sound of children crying as families ran for safety. And they remembered the moment when their soldiers fell, their armies broken. To them, humans were not just enemies, they were nightmares. They were monsters made of flesh and steel. Even now, with the humans gone, the fear of them lingered like smoke that refused to fade. But the mother, though she hated them, carried a strange doubt. She hated them for taking her child, for bringing pain into her home. Yet in her heart, a question kept rising like an unwelcome ghost. If the humans had taken her baby to kill, why had they left no trace? Why did she feel in her bones that her child was still alive? No one else believed it, no one else dared to hope. But hope was all she had left, and she clung to it like breath itself. The people of the city had built a shrine to their dead. It stood in the center of the ruins. A great stone wall covered in names. Every day, families came to add the names of their lost ones. Every day the wall grew heavier with grief. When the mother came, she did not bring her child's name. She refused to write it, refused to let the stone swallow her hope. Her neighbors shook their heads, calling her stubborn, calling her blind. But in her silence she whispered, "Not yet, not ever." The air of the city was thick with rumor. Some said the humans would return. Some said they had left only to strike harder later. And a few whispered something stranger, something dangerous. They said not all humans were the same. They said some humans had shown mercy, had even saved lives. Most laughed at these whispers, spitting on the ground, calling them lies. But the mother listened, and every time she listened, her heart beat faster. Could it be true? Could one of the monsters have chosen a different path? At night, she returned to her cradle. Her song carried through the broken walls. People passing outside shook their heads. To them it was madness, but to her it was survival. Her song was the thread holding her heart together. Her song was her way of telling the universe she would not give up. Even in mourning, even in loss, she sang. The city itself seemed cursed. Shadows moved in alleys. Doors stayed shut. Markets stayed empty. The sound of laughter never returned. Only the sound of crying children and the heavy silence of the broken. The people lived, but they did not live fully. They ate because they must. They worked because they must. But joy was gone. The world was mourning, and it had no end. But in that mourning, her voice became something more. It was not only the sound of a broken mother. It became a symbol, a whisper of resistance. Others began to listen. Some children stood near her window at night, drawn by the strange, sad beauty of her song. Old ones closed their eyes when they heard her voice and remembered their own lost ones. And though many called her mad, some began to wonder if madness was simply another name for hope. The mother did not know it, but her song carried farther than she dreamed. Through the cracks of the city beyond the ruins, into the silence of the night, the world mourned. But her voice broke through it like light through clouds. It was fragile, yes, but it was also unyielding. It was a sound that even the shadows could not silence. And somewhere, far from her broken city, the whispers of humans stirred, not the voices of armies, not the thunder of machines, but the voice of one who had chosen differently, one who had taken a path of mercy, one who carried something small, something precious in his arms, the mother sang in mourning. But her song was already reaching ears she could not imagine, ears that would change her world forever. The days grew longer, but the light in the city did not return. Shadows clung to every wall. Whispers carried through the broken streets. The war was over, but peace had not come. Instead, silence and fear ruled. The people lived with wounds too deep to heal. They hated the humans with every breath. They told stories of blood and fire, stories of cruelty. Children were taught to fear the human face, to hate the human voice. The word human itself was spoken like poison. But among the ruins, rumors began to stir, quiet at first, no louder than the rustle of leaves. Some claimed that not all humans were the same. Some claimed that in the smoke of battle, a few humans had shown mercy. It was said that one human soldier had shielded alien children from falling rubble. It was said another had turned his weapon on his own commander to stop the killing. No one knew if these stories were true, but they spread like sparks on dry wood. The mother heard them too. She sat beside her empty cradle, her song softer now but still alive. Neighbors came to her door sometimes, shaking their heads. "Do not believe such lies," they told her. "Humans have no mercy, they are beasts. They are destroyers," but her heart whispered otherwise. Her heart told her that somewhere in the ashes there was truth. At the marketplace, broken and half-burned, the whispers grew stronger. A merchant spoke of a traveler who swore a human had carried a wounded alien child to safety. A soldier's widow claimed her husband's last letter mentioned a human who refused to strike the helpless. Most dismissed these tales as tricks, as weak dreams from broken hearts, but the mother listened, her chest tight with both fear and hope. One evening, a group of elders gathered in the square. They spoke against the rumors, their voices sharp and hard. "These stories are dangerous," they warned. "They weaken us. They make us forget the truth." The crowd nodded. Angry, desperate, but not all agreed. Some stood at the edges. Silent, eyes uncertain, doubt was growing, even if they would not admit it. The mother returned home that night with the voices of the city echoing in her head. She sat beside the cradle, touched the wood, and whispered, "If there is even one human who is different, then perhaps my child." Her voice broke, but she did not stop. Her heart clung to the rumors like a drowning hand clings to a rope. The city was not kind to those who believed. Children who repeated the rumors were scolded. Adults who spoke of mercy were shamed, but still the stories spread. Hope has a way of moving even in silence. It slips into ears, into hearts, even when people try to push it away. The mother found herself searching faces. Every traveler who came through the city, every shadow at night, her eyes watched them, searching for something human, something different. She did not know what she would do if she saw one. Fear and hate still lived in her, heavy as chains, but hope moved inside her too, and it refused to be silenced. The children of the city began to whisper the rumors like secret games. They played in the dust, pretending to be humans who were kind instead of cruel. The elders scolded them, pulling them away. But the children laughed and returned to their games. Perhaps they could not understand the depth of war, or perhaps they understood something their elders had forgotten, that even enemies might have hearts at night. The mother sang again. Her voice trembled but carried far. The rumors mixed with her song, creating a strange fire in her chest. Could it be true? Could a human have taken her daughter not to destroy but to save? The thought was dangerous. The thought was wild, but she could not push it away. Her neighbors grew colder toward her. They whispered that she was falling deeper into madness. First, she refused to add her child's name to the wall of the dead. Now she listened to rumors. Now she dared to imagine mercy in monsters. Some avoided her house. Some told their children not to go near. But at night, there were still small faces at her window, children listening to her song, their eyes wide with questions, and sometimes she wondered if her voice was the reason the rumors grew stronger, as if her song had become part of them, carrying them farther, deeper into every heart. The world was still in mourning, but mourning cannot last forever. Something was shifting, something unseen. The mother felt it even if she could not name it. Her song was no longer only for her child. It was becoming something larger, something that reached beyond her. Every note carried not only grief but a spark of defiance, a spark that could light the dark and far away, beyond the broken streets and the ruined fields. A human walked alone. His steps were heavy, his arms carrying something small, something fragile. He heard whispers too, not from cities but from his own heart. Whispers that told him he was doing what was right. Even if the world called him traitor, even if no one believed, the rumors of mercy were no longer only rumors. They were footsteps in the night, moving closer. The mother did not know it yet, but the stories she clung to were about to take shape. Her song had reached farther than she dreamed, and soon, the enemy she feared would step through her door, carrying her hope made flesh. The night was heavy with silence. The stars above the ruined city gave no comfort, only cold light inside her small home. The mother sat beside the cradle once more. Her song drifted through the broken air, soft and fragile. It was a song she had sung many nights before, but tonight her voice carried a new edge, a sharpness born of the rumors she had heard. Her hope was alive, and it made her sing with both sorrow and defiance. The cradle rocked gently as her hand touched its side. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. Each note seemed to echo longer than before. Each word seemed to hang in the air like a prayer. Her neighbors closed their shutters, muttering about her madness, but she did not care. Her voice was for her child, and for no one else then without warning. The silence shifted. The air grew thicker. The shadows longer. The mother froze, her hand gripping the cradle tightly. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination. But then she heard it, footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps outside her home. Each step echoed against the broken stones of the street. The sound grew louder, closer. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had heard footsteps many times before, neighbors, children, wandering dogs, but these were different. There was weight in them, purpose, like someone carrying a burden. The mother rose to her feet, her body trembling. Her eyes darted to the door, then to the window. The shadows outside shifted as if someone was moving just beyond the light. Her voice died in her throat, silence filled the room. Her mind raced. Could it be soldiers searching homes? Could it be thieves drawn to her song, or could it be humans? Her people said humans no longer walked these streets, but war leaves ghosts behind, and sometimes those ghosts are made of flesh. She stepped back, clutching the edge of the cradle as though it could protect her. Her breath came in short gasps, fear and hope battling inside her chest. The footsteps stopped just outside her door. The world held its breath. The mother's hand reached for a small knife hidden beneath the chair. It was dull and weak, but it was all she had. She gripped it tightly, her knuckles white, her body shook, but she would not let fear paralyze her. A shadow passed across the crack of the door. Someone was standing there for a long moment. There was nothing but silence, then the wood creaked slow. Groaning under the pressure of a hand, the door shivered in its frame. The mother's heart beat so hard she thought it might break her chest. Every nerve screamed at her to run. But she did not move, she stood her ground. Her hand on the cradle, her knife ready. If it was death at her door, she would face it. If it was the enemy, she would not fall without a fight. The door opened a little. A sliver of cold night air crept in. The mother's breath hitched, her eyes wide. Her mind screamed to close the door, to hide. But something deeper inside her whispered to wait. The footsteps shifted again, closer now, inside the doorway. The figure stepped into the light, but the mother could not yet see clearly. Tall, broad, a shadow wrapped in darkness. Her body stiffened, her knife raised. The figure moved slowly, carefully, as though not wanting to frighten. Her fear turned to confusion. Why would an enemy move like this? The figure stopped, silent, then lowered something into the light. The mother's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes locked on the small bundle wrapped in cloth. The shadow shifted, and the faint cry of a child filled the air. The knife slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Her knees weakened, her body frozen between disbelief and hope. The sound was so familiar, so sharp it pierced her soul. It was the sound she had dreamed of, prayed for, sung for her child. But her mind fought against it. How could it be true? How could her child be here, alive? And why was the child in the arms of a human? The figure stepped fully into the room. Now the mother saw the face. It was human, unmistakably human. Her heart pounded, fear surging once more. But the child's soft cry silenced every other thought. She stared at the bundle, tears blurring her vision. The cradle beside her remained empty. But the emptiness no longer mattered, for in that moment, hope had taken shape in flesh and breath. The mother's voice trembled as she whispered, "Is it her?" The human did not speak at first. He only stood there, holding the child as though the weight was sacred. The mother's hands shook, reaching forward, then pulling back. Fear still gripped her. Her people's voices screamed in her mind, "Humans are monsters." But the cry of her child broke through the noise. Her song had ended in silence. But now a new sound had begun. The sound of life returned. The footsteps at her door had not brought death. They had brought the impossible. And though her mind could not yet understand it, her heart already knew. The world was about to change. The door stood open, and the night air followed the figure inside. The mother's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might break her ribs. She could see now, there was no mistake. The figure was human, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in dark clothing worn from travel, and in his arms, wrapped in cloth, was her child. The bundle moved, a tiny hand slipping free from the fabric. The child's cry pierced the silence, soft but real. The sound cut through the weight of fear. Through the walls of doubt, the mother's knees buckled, and she fell against the cradle, her hands gripping the edge. For so long she had sung to emptiness, and now the emptiness had broken, her eyes filled with tears. Blurring her sight, she wiped them quickly, afraid it was a dream. afraid if she blinked the vision would vanish. But the child was still there, breathing, alive, her child. Her body screamed to run forward, to take her daughter back into her arms, but her mind held her still. The man holding the child was human, the enemy, the same enemy who had destroyed her city, who had taken so many lives. Why was he here? And why was her baby in his arms? The mother's voice shook when she finally spoke. Why? Why do you have her? Her words were almost a whisper, yet they struck the silence like thunder. The human did not move quickly. He shifted his weight, lowering the bundle slightly. As though to show he meant no harm, his face was pale, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. When he spoke, his voice was deep, rough and broken. Yours, he said slowly, the word heavy, uncertain. Your child, the mother gasped. Her hands pressed to her mouth. The sound of his voice was strange, twisted by an accent. But the meaning was clear. Her body trembled, torn between rushing forward and fleeing into the dark. Every instinct told her humans were liars, killers, monsters, yet here one stood. Holding life instead of death, the child whimpered again, and the mother's heart cracked open. Her body moved on its own, a step forward, then another. Her eyes never left the bundle. Her hands lifted slowly, shaking, but she stopped just short, fear pulling her back. What do you want? She demanded, her voice sharp though her tears still fell. Why bring her here? The human shook his head, his breath heavy as if the journey had cost him everything. No want, he said softly, struggling with the words. Lost. I keep safe. He looked down at the child in his arms, his expression softer than she expected from a monster. Then he lifted his gaze again, meeting her eyes. Yours, he repeated, firmer now. The mother's chest heaved with every breath. Her knife lay forgotten on the floor. Her cradle stood empty at her side. The weight of choice pressed against her. Could she take the child from his arms? Could she trust this enemy even for a moment? Every story her people told screamed that it was a trick. But her child's cry silenced every voice but one, her own heart. Her hands reached forward, trembling. The human bent his arm slightly, as though offering the bundle for a heartbeat. Their fingers brushed against each other through the cloth. The mother flinched, a shock running through her. She had touched the enemy, and yet, it was not fire, not pain, it was simply skin, rough, scarred, but alive. She pulled the child into her arms at last, clutching her daughter to her chest. Her tears flowed freely now, her voice breaking into sobs. The child's small face pressed against her, warm and real. She buried her cheek into the soft cloth, whispering the lullaby she had sung so many nights. The human stepped back, watching in silence, his hands empty now. The mother rocked the child gently, her body trembling with joy and fear. Her eyes lifted to the man again, wet with tears. Why, she whispered, her voice raw. Why would you do this? Why return her? The human's face was unreadable in the dim light. He seemed to search for words, his mouth opening and closing. Finally he spoke, slow and halting. Because I could. His eyes lowered, shadowed with something she could not name. Guilt, sorrow, maybe both. Others. Oh, they not care, he said. I care. The words struck her like a storm. This was the enemy, the one her people cursed, and yet he stood here, tired, broken, but holding no weapon. He had brought her daughter back. When he could have done the opposite, her people would never believe it. Perhaps even she could barely believe it, but the truth was in her arms, breathing, alive. The mother's tears did not stop. Her hatred and her hope clashed inside her. For a long moment she said nothing. She simply held her child, rocking, whispering. The human did not move, only stood in the doorway, his shoulders sagged, as though he had carried not only a child but also the weight of war itself. The night stretched long, the room filled with the sound of the baby's breathing, the mother's soft song, and the silence of the human who had chosen mercy. The cradle stood beside them, no longer empty. But the truth of what had just happened was too large, too heavy to understand yet. The mother's eyes narrowed as she looked at the man once more. She did not trust him, she could not. But the proof of his choice lay in her arms, and deep inside, she knew this night was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The night pressed against the walls, heavy and dark. Inside the small home, the mother held her child close. Rocking gently, her tears stained the cloth. But she did not care. Her daughter's tiny breaths warmed her chest. Her tiny fingers curled around her mother's hand. The cradle was no longer empty, but her heart was filled with more than joy, fear, confusion, and questions. Her eyes lifted again to the figure at the doorway. The human stood still, his shadow long across the floor. He carried no weapon, only scars and exhaustion. Yet his presence was sharp, like a blade in the silence. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me why. Tell me how." The man lowered his head. As if the weight of her words pressed on him, his mouth moved slowly, shaping words as if they were heavy stones. "War," he said first, his voice rough and halting. "Chaos, fire, screams. I see your child alone." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Others, soldiers, they not care. They leave. They destroy." His eyes flickered with something sharp, anger or shame. I cannot." The mother's arms tightened around the baby. Her breath trembled. Her people had told her humans were monsters, without heart, without mercy. But here was one speaking of choice. Of care still, she did not lower her guard. "You expect me to believe you," she whispered, her voice sharp though her body shook. "Humans do not save, humans do not give back. They only take." The man did not move, his voice remained steady. "Most," he said, nodding slowly. "Yes, most do this." His eyes met hers, firm, unflinching. "But not all. Not me." He placed a hand on his chest, tapping it with a fist. "I choose, I carry her. I protect." He stepped forward slightly, then stopped, careful not to cross the invisible line of her fear. "I give back because it is right." The mother stared at him, her tears blurring her sight again. Her heart ached with both rage and gratitude. She wanted to scream at him for the suffering his kind had caused. She wanted to strike him, to curse him, to push him out into the cold night. But her arms were full of the life he had returned. Her daughter's warmth made her silence. The child whimpered, and the mother rocked her gently, whispering soft words. The human watched, his eyes softening. He looked almost out of place in that moment. Not a monster. Not a soldier, but a man. His face carried shadows of regret, lines carved by choices he could not erase. Finally, he spoke again, his voice lower, almost a whisper. "I see too much," he said. "War make monsters. But I not want be monster." His words broke, rough and simple. But the meaning was clear. The mother's breath caught. Was it possible, truly possible, that in the heart of war a human had chosen something different? Her people would never believe it. Perhaps she barely believed it herself. But the truth sat in her arms, alive and safe. That truth could not be denied. Her eyes narrowed as she studied him. "Why bring her back here?" she asked, her tone sharper now. "You could have left her anywhere. You could have given her to anyone. Why bring her to me?" The man's face shifted, his eyes heavy with something unspoken. "Because," he said slowly, struggling for words, "child. Need mother." He looked at her then fully, his gaze unwavering. "You sing?" he added softly, his head tilting slightly as if he had heard it in the distance. "Song. Carry far, I hear," she hear. The mother's heart twisted. Had her voice, her endless lullaby, reached him, reached her child? Was her song truly the thread that tied them back together? Her breath shook as the thought pierced her. Her madness, as her people called it, had been something more. It had been a beacon. The human stepped back now, his hands at his sides, empty. His body sagged with weariness, but his eyes held no malice. "I give her, I go," he said quietly. "No danger, no harm. Only return." The mother's chest tightened at his words. Go, she thought. Yes, he should leave. He was the enemy. His presence alone could bring danger. If her people saw him here, they would not listen. They would not forgive. They would kill him without question, and yet... Her lips trembled, unable to speak the word leave. The child stirred in her arms, cooing softly. The mother pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, tears wetting the soft skin. She looked again at the human, the man who had returned what she thought was lost forever. Her voice came out softer now, though still uncertain. "You risked your life," she whispered. "Why risk for us? Your enemies." The man's eyes lowered, shadowed with pain. "Because enemy, child," he said, shaking his head. "No enemy, only life." His words were clumsy, but they burned with truth. He raised his gaze again, eyes sharp with quiet fire. One child worth more than war. The room was silent after his words. The mother rocked her daughter slowly, her heart caught between hate and hope. Her people would call her mad for even listening. But she could not deny what she had seen, what she had felt. The human had risked everything to return her child. He had chosen mercy when others chose destruction. Her song had called into the night, and against all reason a human had answered. The cradle was no longer empty, but her world had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. The night stretched on, endless and still. The mother held her child close, rocking gently as the small breaths filled her chest with warmth. The human stood at the doorway, silent, his body tired but his eyes steady. They were two enemies sharing the same room, bound together by a child, and for the first time since the war began, the silence did not feel empty. The mother looked at him again, her eyes sharp, uncertain. Every part of her had been raised to fear his kind, to see them as monsters. Yet here he stood unarmed, carrying nothing but the memory of his choice. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You should go," she whispered. "If my people find you here, they will kill you." The man nodded slowly, as though he had already known this truth. His shoulders sagged, but he did not move just yet. Instead, his gaze shifted to the cradle beside her, once empty but now ready to be filled. "Safe now," he said softly, almost to himself. "She live, you sing, she live." The mother's heart tightened at his words. Her song, once thought of as madness, had become something more. It had called across the darkness, and it had been answered. She closed her eyes for a moment, her tears falling onto the soft hair of her daughter. When she opened them, she saw the man not only as the enemy, but as something else, something complicated, something human. Her people would never understand if they knew she had looked into a human's eyes and seen mercy. They would call her a traitor if they knew she had accepted her child from human hands. They would never forgive. And yet the truth could not be erased. Her child was alive because of him. The war had destroyed so much, but it had not destroyed everything. The child stirred in her arms, cooing softly. The mother smiled through her tears. Pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead, she whispered the lullaby again, her voice soft and trembling. The man listened. His eyes lowering. For a moment, the war seemed far away. For a moment, there was only music, mother, child, and hope. When her song ended, silence returned. The man finally turned toward the door, his body heavy with the choice to leave. But before he stepped out, the mother's voice stopped him. "Wait," she said, her tone sharp yet uncertain. He froze, glancing back at her, her eyes narrowed, her arms clutching the child tighter. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Saving her, returning her to me. Do you regret it?" The man shook his head, slow, certain. "No," he said firmly, his rough voice carrying more weight than any weapon. "I regret war. I regret death. But not this." His eyes softened as they met hers. "This is right." Her chest ached at his words in his broken speech. There was more truth than she had ever heard in the voices of generals or leaders. Her hatred faltered, though it did not vanish. But her heart began to see what her eyes could not deny. A human had chosen kindness when cruelty was easier. The mother looked down at her daughter, safe in her arms. The cradle beside her was no longer a symbol of loss, but of survival. Her song had not been madness. It had been a thread of hope, and against all odds, that thread had been answered. She lifted her gaze again, her voice quieter now. "You saved her life," she whispered. "Maybe. You saved mine too." The man did not answer with words. He only gave a small nod, a gesture heavy with meaning. Then he turned once more to the door, stepping into the night. The air outside swallowed him, his shadow fading into darkness, but his presence lingered heavy in the room. The mother sat for a long time, rocking her child. Her thoughts twisted like tangled roots. Her people would never accept the truth of what happened tonight. They would never believe a human had shown mercy. But she knew, and her child would grow knowing too. The truth was a seed now planted in her heart, a seed that no war could burn away. The city outside remained broken, its people trapped in mourning. But within one small home, something new had begun. The song of a mother had reached across enemy lines. It had touched a heart where none expected it could. And that choice, that fragile moment of mercy, was more powerful than any weapon. As dawn broke, the first light touched the cradle. The mother laid her daughter inside, her voice soft as she whispered promises. Her child stretched, yawning, safe at last. The cradle was no longer empty. It was full of life, full of hope. The mother's eyes lifted to the horizon. The war had taken so much, but not everything. And though the scars would never fade, she carried something her people did not yet see. She carried the proof that even in the darkest night, light could still appear, and sometimes that light came from the most unexpected place. From the enemy, from the human heart. The mother began to sing again, her voice steady now. Her song carried into the morning air, not only for her child but for the broken world around her. It was no longer a song of loss but a song of return, a song of hope, and far away perhaps the human heard it too. Perhaps he carried it with him as he walked alone. A reminder that even in war, even in hate, there can be something greater. The cradle was full, her arms were full, and her song promised that the future did not belong only to war. It belonged to hope, to life, to peace. And it began with her child, with one human who chose mercy,